Hey guys, this is
EckhartsLadder with I hate this disgusting piece of Star Wars lore. Let me guess, looking at the picture, it's new canon. Who knows? We'll see.
Justin. Hope everyone is having a great day. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. Most of my content I make so it can be watched by children, it can be watched by people with their families. I've got kids, they'll probably watch some of my videos in the future. This one, however, I do not recommend for children nor for parents to watch with their kids because we're going over some stuff from Star Wars Legends, which is
okay, it is a U-based, so
I'll
let's
say
see.
radically out of line with most of what we get in the rest of Star Wars, which essentially operates as a science fantasy series. Yes, there are murders, there's torture, genocide even, but there are definitely certain lines which usually are not crossed,
Is he cursing?
but
Let's
which will
see.
be in the bit of lore we're discussing today. So just keep that in mind. Either way, let's travel back to the Dark Forces series. You know the ones, of course.
Okay.
Kyle Katarn fighting the
Yeah, the remaster's so good.
Empire, Dark Troopers, and in the second game in the series, Jedi Knight, becoming a Jedi Knight, hence the title, and facing off against Jarek.
Yeah, well, I haven't watched the video, so it's like, well, he could at one point. Who knows? He said he's not making them for kids, this one.
And his cadre of Dark Jedi. One of these Dark Jedi is named Saris. You can see her here in the very fun FMV cutscenes used in the game. And there's actually lore which gives her an appearance
Was he meant to edit the FMV cutscenes there?
in A New Hope as a character previously known as the Prophetess. Alright, and this takes us to the part I honestly have avoided talking about for
Lego Star
pretty much the
Wars.
entire time I've run this channel. You know, I don't like edginess or darkness for darkness' sake. It's fun talking about disturbing content when it's creative, Star Weirds, the now, but I don't find content which aims to shock more than anything else particularly interesting, and I really only talk about this because I think it's an important lesson in managing lore so that it's in keeping with the spirit and tone of the universe.
There's a bit of that, but also it's like that's a similar reason. It's like there's horror stuff that is like, okay, if I'm watching a horror movie or playing a horror game, I want something more than just, oh, this is scary. I want an interesting story or something with it. Because otherwise it's just like, yeah, okay, my brain's already separating the fiction from reality, so I don't really get properly scared from it. Sometimes the jump scares will surprise me or something, and sometimes there's a really good atmosphere built up, which is a bit tense, but truly scare me? Not really. So a lot of that shock factor gets lost on me, and I'll look for something more interesting in it anyway.
You can get away with in Warhammer is different than Star Wars, is different than Lord of the Rings, is different than Game of Thrones. That should go without saying. Alright, that takes us to a series of articles which appeared on StarWars.com known as Imperial Warlords, Despoilers of an Empire. I've read from these articles several times. Overall, they're very interesting. They make lots of connections between disparate aspects of the expanded universe, tying things together which previously were not connected. And the articles also certainly served as a vehicle for Abel Pena, the Star Wars author behind many short stories and RPGs, to connect little bits of the universe which he had tried to in the past. And in part 3, we get a look at Lord Shadowspawn.
Lord Shadowspawn, or Lord Cronal, who started off in the newspaper strips. Shadows of Mindor was an odd book. Which thing do you mean? This? This is Mara versus Lumia, the Emperor's Pawns. Let me check. Because I don't think I've read through those as much. It's an article appearing in Gamer number 5. Providing background information on minor characters that surrounded Emperor Palpatine. It was Pena's first published Star Wars article. Oh yeah, that's Lumia. She has her origin in the classic Marvel comics. And that's part of the classic Marvel comics that I really like, is the introduction of Lumia. and how she came to be. And then Lumia later on appears from memory in Legacy of the Force and stuff too. Because she comes in with the saber whip, and then Luke has to find a way to fight against it, and he creates the Shoto lightsaber, the second lightsaber that he uses, because the whip entangles up his lightsaber when he just uses a single one and makes it useless. So Lumia is a really cool character. Let me see. Like, her name's Shira Bree. Oh, I'll look at Shira Bree then. Tell that the saber whip's cool. Where else does she appear? Yeah, a bunch of the old Marvel comics, that's her main like origin story, and then that's never been retold, but that's Marvel comics. Yeah, Legacy of the Force. So she goes from old Marvel to like being mentioned in The Rise and Fall of Darth Vader and A New Hope, The Life of Luke Skywalker. And then a short story, and then Legacy of the Force, and then she's in some of Crosscurrent, Riptide, and Fate of the Jedi mentioned. Okay, interesting. So she's sort of mentioning things, but her main appearance after the Marvel comics is Legacy of the Force and a short story. Which, that's a particular short story that is going to, yeah, that covers some of what she's been up to. It's cool. Yeah, she starts as Shira Bree and then she becomes Lumia. And it's interesting to see the development of it. I'd definitely recommend those Marvel comics, because there's a really good plotline with Shira Bree. Because she, yeah. Guess what? She's also one of Luke Skywalker's girlfriends. Oh yeah, that is true. Well, they don't tend to. Luke has so many girlfriends. Anyway.
Pena, the Star Wars author behind many short stories and RPGs, to connect little bits of the universe, which he had tried to in the past. And in part 3...
she started off joining the rebellion and then being undercover for a long time until it was revealed that she was a pawn of the Emperor. And then when she almost died, she got rebuilt with cybernetics, and that's why she looks all wrapped up and looks quite different later on with how she looked on that cover.
We get a look at Lord Shadowspawn. Let's go over the backstory, and we'll get to the bit in a minute. Hans. So the article explains that Lord Shadowspawn was in fact a Darksider known as Chronal. We've talked about...
They kissed. They didn't exactly bang because it's all PG, but they kissed.
Chronal on the channel before. He has various identities, including Shadowspawn, but also Black Hole, a character first introduced in the old Star Wars newspaper comics.
Yeah, Black Hole, that's right. And then there's the Star Wars Demolition soundtrack is by Black Hole Stormtrooper, according to the metadata of it. So in some way, Black Hole is involved with Star Wars Demolition, which is interesting. It is implied, yeah.
Explained that Chronal was, and I quote, ripped from his mother's chest shortly after his birth and reached adulthood among the frightening warlocks of the planet Rand in the unknown regions. He was raised worshipping the way of the dark and training with the sorcerers of Rand, developed strange abilities, including Darkshire, which essentially generates a weapon out of pure force power. The article explains that his most cherished ability was Darksight, the capacity to foresee viable futures and bring about the one which most aligned with maximum annihilation, as worshipping destruction generally was a key aspect of the Sorcerers of Tund and their teaching. You probably start to see where he gets...
Sorcerers of Tund. I called them Sorcerers of Tund as I read it, but yeah, that's
the name Black Hole. The article continues stating that he believed he transcended the dualistic classification of the Force into light and dark side, though I mean, come on. Wanting destruction, moving everything towards destruction. I guess you could argue entropy is natural, but seems pretty clearly dark side. And in fact, he would go on to join the Prophets of the Dark Side, a very strange group who we've seen pop up in a few of my videos. Anyway, alongside the Prophets of the Dark Side, Andromen Kos, Chronal would ultimately father a child, and that child would be Ceres, the Dark Jedi from the Jedi Knight series. And this
I never read this article. That's interesting.
is where we get, well, the gross bit. So, while Andromen Kos, Chronal was esoteric force abilities, Ang-Ti flow walking, for example, something Jason Solo would do. And in fact, his own teachings would drive some of the other prophets insane, including one known as Marilli. Anyway, the article goes on to say, and I quote, Chronal spared his own daughter Ceres the horror of the mind, only to scar her far more deeply. Born of his tryst with a fellow prophetess, Chronal shamefully deemed his offspring's existence a tribute to creation and hence a transgression against the nihilism of the dark. Thus, he disavowed his daughter in the most heinous way possible, allowing not only the other prophets of the dark side to freely engage her in Congress, but partaking in this revulsion himself, all the better to venerate the way of the dark. So,
bruh. Yeah. That's a bit far.
the dark. So what the author is
couldn't really find an appropriate way to show this on YouTube or convey this through Star Wars artwork. Yeah, no, I totally get that.
Saying here, because some of you may not be familiar with the language, is that he offered up his daughter to be raped by the other prophets of the dark side, something he also did himself. Now, my main problem with this is obvious in that, well, for one, it's disgusting, but it's also just not in line with the rest of the universe. This entire article, and I do usually like Abel's work, is clearly him essentially making fan fiction.
So, to the point, there are some pretty disgusting things in some of the stories, like in Dark Times. There's some pretty shocking things, and it gets quite dark. It is in the name of the comic run. But also, this is just information on an article. Like, I haven't really looked at the articles as primary sources for a lot of information, because I go, well, it's someone writing an article. And I do get the impression that, yeah, some of the... It's like, is someone saying stuff about it that is not actually shown in a story? How much should that weigh in?
Connecting all these things he's wanted to connect or has connected in the past. He goes out of his way to tie in as many cool Star Wars Legends things like flow walking, like the Sorcerers of Rand, then to essentially make it edgy because nothing else in the universe is like this, he makes it so a father rapes his daughter and allows other grown adults to do so as well. The implication to me is also that she was, if not a very young child, at least a child during this situation, given the fact that he sees her creation itself as a transgression against the nihilism of the dark, which itself doesn't make sense. He's supposed to worship impermanence, but there's nothing more temporary than a human life. It's so stupid, and to have this thrown in after his fan fiction about dark side force weapons, essentially, it's cheesy. There are a few other
Yeah, and it's like he could easily have gone, yeah, he treated his daughter badly, and not done it that way. Like, yeah, they can't affect the past, but they can see it, which is cool. Yeah, this is EckhartsLadder talking about, I hate this disgusting piece of the Star Wars lore, and I'm like, This is EckhartsLadder. It's not Stupendous Wave. Don't conflate them at all. Yeah, I'd never read that before. I don't go online reading those articles. I tend to just read the stories and see what they present, because a bunch of the articles are different. Well, you don't it's text. I can't read it and say it's like anyway, whatever. I'm just getting late anyway.
Star Wars stories which have tried to handle rape or sexual assault, they never do so very well. Most famously, it was part of the backstory of Boba Fett back in the day. There are a few other occasions as well, often with Twi'leks too, and having a forced to be dancers slave species is also, yeah, not the best thing the universe has ever done. You can look into the character of Alima Rar for more on that. And again, in a universe which has a set tone, it's just a very cheap and gross way to try to make your character evil without putting the legwork in, really. I don't know, I just don't like it. I don't like the end of all the better to venerate the way of the dark, as if that's a way to talk about childhood incestual assault. And yeah, if I were the editor of this article, I would not have allowed this to go online. I think it's somewhat of a black mark against an otherwise pretty cool series of articles. Star Wars authors have to be careful. They have to know what the universe is. Maybe there's a way to tackle the subject matter properly. I'm going to argue this isn't it. It's also why there's a difference between...
I was going to mention Dark Times. There we go. Yeah, I don't think doing it in an article like this is it. And a lot of things in the articles, I would say, you are connecting all this together, cool, but from a story perspective, when you're reading the stories, you have to see it being something that could be in the subtext or something that seems to make sense. Let's see what he says here.
Blowing up the Death Star, it's basically the Jedi being cleansed with children being killed. Order 66
this
works
isn't
because
dark
it's treated
he's
seriously,
not mentioning Dark Times.
Nudged in between, and I'm not joking.
I think this is similar to, Jaylan G talking about off-brand, like Pokemon, when we mentioned that Pokemon thing. Brain melding. Mentioned that Pokemon thing where you were like, this seems off-brand for Pokemon.
I'm not joking. Chronal having cool dark side black sword magic, and also him making Sith robots called Mechaduru. Anyway, that's my thought. I'm sure some of you will disagree with me. Some of you think the universe should be edgy. I don't. I think Star Wars essentially is, as mentioned, space fantasy, and it needs to be remembered. Again, my opinion. Let me know yours respectfully down below. See you guys next time.
So really his main complaint is this part of the article, right? Where was it to show? Part of like off-brand thing, right, with Star Wars. Like, how do I say this? I feel like Star Wars has grown so big with the expanded universe that there is a place where you can have very different genres and themes and different stories in the Star Wars universe. So you can have dark and very dark things like this in certain stories, but I think that's also why Star Wars never did many horror stories, because it's not really something that is what people go to read a Star Wars book about. And it does plausibly fit in Star Wars as a thing that could happen. But I think putting it in an article is a bad way to just say, oh yeah, it happened. And then you don't have any context. And also, Star Wars has never done explicit sexual depictions. So it should... I won't... I should disclaim it. I haven't read anything with an explicit sexual depiction in Star Wars. And I would say you would want something that is actually framed in a story, and you could imply that this happens but not go into it. And that way you can go, okay, this works, and you have a story in the context that actually leads up to that. and explains it more. Whereas this is virtually the explanation you get for it, and that's why it seems like it doesn't fit. And it's also why sometimes with source books and then I'm like, I don't care, I just want to read a story. So, to say that he goes, it doesn't fit at all, like they could do a short story and that sort of thing. Does she have many other appearances? Yeah, because she's not dead, is she? I'm having a moment.
Yeah.
She is dead, duh. Duh, you kill her in Jedi Knight. So, my brain at the moment is like, oh, hang on a minute. Yeah, there's a picture of her in the cutscene. Yeah. But, like, she was already messed up and dark-sided and all that anyway. So, wait, she was retconned into the Star Wars Holiday Special? What? Wait. Afterwards, the prophetess was retconned to be Saris. That's why in Threats of the Galaxy they have that's the picture from Threats of the Galaxy. Oh, and yeah. That's interesting. I didn't even know she would be retconned into the Star Wars Holiday Special. So there you go. But yeah, I think overall, like, some of this stuff is like, you don't want to hear the details, but can reference it. You have parts of the Dark Times comics. I'll say this again, the Dark Times comics spoilers had a... Here's a spoiler break for a moment. Had a big reveal at one point where one of the villains was eating one of the other... was eating Bomo's species. And that was very dark and took me by surprise. And I'm like, damn, that's so dark. So it does seem like an Eck issue with saying this is sort of off-brand completely. But also, they really could have framed this better. And I don't know if I can put much stock in some of the articles just online like this. To be fair. He didn't put a link to it. Despoilers of an Empire. Where is it? Part 1, 2, 3. Where was it? No! What? Bloody StarWars.com removed them as well. I have to go to the Wayback Machine versions. Bloody StarWars.com. Why would they do that? Edit it to have a Legends label on top of it or something. It wouldn't be hard to put on your website. This part... Oh, this is it. It's in part 3. There's a lot of stuff. Yeah. Here it is. But I would also say, like, if he's saying this seems off-brand and whatnot and doesn't fit, I would say making it, like, some of the abilities seem also out of left field, like they're just fan-fiction-y sounding, like conjuring a weapon out of nothing, and all that sounds fan-fiction-y to me too, and cheesy, like you was saying. And all of that. Anyway, I think it's just an issue of not having the right framing and needing to, like, if you're gonna do something like this, I think you should do it in a story rather than just an article. That was an interesting video as far as the discussion goes, though. Damn. See, I'd never read through this. Because I'm like, I haven't read through all the EU yet. Why would I start looking at the articles? Damn. Alright. It's side material. Yeah, it's like source books. I haven't got a motivation to read through all the source books yet. The main reason why I started reading through some source books was I actually started playing the RPG, and that's when I went, oh, I can read through the source materials. It is a him problem, but also I can see why he reached that conclusion, because he ended up, like, most of Star Wars is not like that. The movies aren't. Most of the expanded universe isn't. But then also immediately I think of, like, the X-Wing series. Isn't Izard sent someone as a messenger to Rogue Squadron or Wraith Squadron? I forget which one it was now. I think it was Wraith Squadron. And had a guy literally blow up after she sent him back. And there's things like that in the Star Wars universe, like that is twisted and dark, but then also really makes sense in the context of the story. Yeah. But also I feel like I get where he's coming from, where she didn't need that. You could have had her as Colonel's daughter, or Shadowspawn's daughter, one of them. Black Hole's daughter. And then not really gone, well, everyone raped her, like. It could have just been she also was a follower of the she also learned in the Sorcerers of Tundra and whatever, and she's left them when she could because they didn't treat her very well. And it wouldn't have to have been rape and whatever, it was just normal dark side shenanigans. And it makes sense. You don't have to have something of in the face of the, like, against the nihilism of the dark or whatever. It could really just be, yes, we don't kill people willy-nilly that are going to be following the dark side and their philosophies. Then it wouldn't stand out. No, it wouldn't. And the whole video wouldn't have been made because it wouldn't be shock factor. But there's already plenty of other stuff about Shadowspawn and Chrono and Black Hole, whichever you want to call him there anyway. Yeah, it just, I don't mind it, but like in the way he's talking about it, I just think those sorts of things, especially when it's like, most of Star Wars is not like that. You just need some more context to it, a bit more meaning behind it than just, I put it in this article and that's then right. For the Hutts, they tend to just be showing their power. But yeah, no, it's a part of a realistic world. I think that's what gets me. If people are complaining about this is off-brand or whatever, I think they don't have a full understanding that it's got so much world building and so much information to it that it is a realistic world. And that is something that I really love about the expanded universe, is that it treats it like it's a realistic world. And has some of these things that exist in it. And I think giving examples of some stuff that's actually happened in stories, you can go, that's actually not that far off in certain contexts.